Kia ora everyone, I'm Bryce, and I am trying to not only keep this roll going with uploading to YouTube, but also work on my pile of shame. I foolishly bought more minis recently, and so I've done nothing but add to this, and I certainly haven't been painting things all that much for the past while, aside from what you guys have been seeing here. So, yeah, I'm out of practice, but that certainly, as you may know if you've seen my most recent video, I am being relatively ambitious for somebody who is so out of practice. And this week, I have been working on a Blight Templar from Games Workshop's range. I believe for Age of Sigmar, I bought 3 of these guys along with, I believe, 14 Pox Wretches, who are from the same faction. Now, I got these guys, I took them out of their sprues and assembled them, and I realized that I truly adore these designs. These guys are so fit for a lot of the plans that I have in mind for various tabletop games. I assembled all of the minis, I glued them all together, and then I went over every single one of them, and so I have a kitten, and because of him, I can't really airbrush right now, so I kind of got a little bit impatient, and I just brush applied all of my primer to all of the minis, and then I went over the Blight Templars with a dark purple as a base coat, because I had plans to coat these guys in a green metal armor, which is something that I have not done before, and I'm out of practice, so I figured I would just start with painting a single one of these guys as a test run, and I picked this one here that you can see on screen, as he's got a very, open pose to him, which meant that a lot of the parts of the armor were very accessible. It was very easy for me to kind of visualize where light would be hitting more than other places. So I went ahead and yeah, I love putting a base coat of purple down for anything green. This ranges from orcs to, yeah, orcs. From that purple base coat, I then applied a very dark green before applying some sort of more mid-tone green in, again, very thin layers across the portions of the mini that would be less in shadow. I then went over with a second layer of that, just to sort of brighten the color of it, distinguish it a little bit more against the dark green undertone, and every single time I applied another layer of paint to this, I made sure to cover less ground than the previous layer of paint. Especially when we get into what is the actual mid-tone for this model, which was the, it's Glacier Blue. It certainly serves as a very nice step toward the highlights of this mini from the mid-tone green. I do kind of regret glazing the miniature as much as I did after, I think, the next step from this, because I feel like it could have done with that sort of more distinguishing, stark contrasting between the different layers of paint. So when I move from this model to painting the other 2 of the set, I think I'm going to aim to have a more stark contrast between the layers of paint and the different tones of color in it. Once that was all done, and I was feeling good about it, then I took some regular yellow and just applied that to the very most lit portions of the armor, where I felt light would be striking it the most. I made sure to coat the edges of that just gaping wound in the front of the armor. I don't know what you'd call that region, the belly, making sure that it could sort of really pop with color and be nicely distinguished against the guts that are just falling out of the front of him. And I think I did very well to aid the shape and pose of the model in applying the shading and the highlights to it. It has a really good form, and I do have the model to thank for that. Everything to it made it incredibly easy for me to kind of map out where these highlights and shadows would end up going. From here, I was feeling that I needed to kind of like reel back the vibrancy of it and also blend the edges of all of the different layers of color together a little bit more, so I did apply that green glaze to the entire thing, which, like I've said, unfortunately muted some of the blue tone in amongst it. I did follow this up with a wash of blue contrast paint, and that was just to make sure that I could deepen the most shaded areas of the model. I don't really know what it's called, but I was applying a very thin blue, dark blue wash, doing the opposite of edge highlighting. Wherever there was particularly an overlap in armor or any details, I applied that blue so that there would be just a little streak of shadow underneath it, and it absolutely paid off. Through a combination of putting nice, vibrant yellow highlights near those edges and then having that dark blue in there absolutely helped develop far more depth to the image of the model. I was so happy with it. There was a lot of like alterations, just small ones, that I had to do as I was going with this project, simply because I'm so out of practice. So now that I was so far along with the green metal, I started working on the bits of metal that I hadn't done anything with yet. Mostly the circular plates and the whatever spiral is going on the pauldron, and I based those in a dark red along with the organs spilling out of his center, and then from there I couldn't help myself but start painting up those entrails, because I love painting gore. It's one of my favorite things to paint up. And once I was done with that, I moved on to from one of my favorite things to the other. I started painting the base coat for the bone horn that's sort of protruding from his head, and continued along with just like some little touch-ups here and there with the leather that was going to end up being a somewhat similar color palette to the bone. I figured while I had the paint out, I may as well just do everything that it was relevant for. I decided to go over, add some sort of brighter edge highlights along different parts of the model. I felt like I'd lost a little bit of the yellow tinge to certain parts, so I added a bit, and then Nandor, like he is now, decided to hop up on my desk and help out. Everyone say hi, Nandor. Isn't he pretty? He's so pretty. Thank you for sniffing my microphone. It's very helpful. Okay, right, you can go back on my desk now. So, once I was done appeasing Nandor's attention, I got back to applying some brass tone to the red metal that I had base coated. And while I was doing that, I was aiming to mostly only have it cover sort of the 2/3 of the metal that was closest to any top-down illumination. That way it left the bottom of any pieces of this metal that nice dark red, and when I came in later, or now, with the gold that I used as like a little bit of highlighting across the tops of all of those bits of metal, it really gave that 3 tiers of shading to it: the highlight, the midtone, the shadow. And that's kind of the minimum that I try to operate with whenever I paint anything. I like to have a minimum of 3 different tones to it so that you get that highlight, midtone, shading. I think personally my ideal number of different layers of contrast and tone to something is probably 5. I do think that out of the projects that I have done where I've implemented 7 different sort of degrees of that, they've certainly come out the best works that I've ever done, but I don't like that big of workload, so 5 is a nice comfortable mid-ground for me. Actually, speaking of all of this, I did have to go in with all of his leathers with a couple more different tones, just to create greater separation between the sort of browns of the metals and the leathers themselves, because a lot of those metals are right next to the leathers, so I ended up putting some sort of pale flesh tones, elven skin, those sorts of colors into the leather. That way it had a bit more of a sort of rosy tone to it instead of the brown, brassy tones of the metal garnishings to this guy, which personally I do feel that distinguishing brown-toned things from each other on models is some of the hardest tasks that I really have with a lot of models, particularly with Games Workshop models, but yeah. And with so much of the model done, I was able to work on sort of final touches for a lot of the different aspects of this. I was able to contrast shade with purple on the entrails for this guy. I was able to sort of add the brightest highlights to the horn protruding from his head, touch up a lot of the edges of the leather wrap around his arm, which, oh, I hate. I hate like wraps, bandage wraps, leather belts tied around stuff. I hate those details because of how much effort it takes for such a small thing. It's annoying for me, but we got through it, and as a treat, I was able to go back over the entrails spilling out and really, really make it look just vibrantly disgusting. And I think with the backdrop of the cool green tones to the armor, it really brings the guts spilling out of him to the forefront of your attention, because it just stands out so much, and I really, really like it. A lot of the time in the past, I've painted armored models with just straight up metallic paints, and I think that this combination of kind of non-metallic metals mixed with actual metallic metals certainly paid off. Keeping the shadow as the base color red that I applied certainly helped kind of create a bit more of a designed depth to the model, which is really cool, and I think that it's kind of a good compromise for me to have reached between non-metallic metals and metallic metals, which I think ultimately has been the goal for me for a while, because I like superimposing highlights and things like that, but non-metallic metals, it's a lot of brain work. It's a lot of brain power. Anyway, so from here I made sure to put black contrast paint into the visor holes of the helmet, and later I do go over the edges of those where I felt light would be striking them the most with some bright yellow, just to create some nice edge highlights, good definition to those slots in the helmet. I don't know armor words, I'm sorry. And now that the majority of the entire model was done, I just touched up just basically all of the details. I made sure that I was happy with all of the highlighting, the shading, how the blending of the colors, and anything that I wasn't happy with, I simply altered until I was happy with it. And yeah, I was able to add a lot of little highlights, little details that I felt were completely necessary by the end of it. And I ended up being very pleased with this model. I do have to say, I think one of the most challenging parts of painting models like this tends to be the fingers. If they're grasping a weapon, a lot of the time, getting that definition for each individual digit is really annoying. I also debated painting up the sort of more organic-looking parts of his weapons as, like, organic matter, flesh, that sort of deal. I ultimately decided against it. I got a second opinion, and we felt that the silver meant that they wouldn't kind of detract from the organs spilling out of him, because we felt that if I did apply like purples and stuff to the axes as well, it would kind of draw the eye away from that centralized point. And ultimately, I'm very happy with the decision. I really like how this has ended up. Now that my disgusting little man was so far along and looking so good, it was only a matter of making his base, which consisted of me applying a bunch of like little balsa wood planks and cutting them up on his base, applying like a texture paste to it, letting that set, and then just painting it all up. I also decided to add the detail of one of the planks that he was actually stepping on. I snapped that in half so that it's kind of like concaved where he's stepping on it, just to kind of sell the heft of this guy. He's a big lad, so I feel like if he was stepping on what I ended up painting to look like kind of rotting wood, you know, I feel like that wouldn't exactly stand up to the durability test that this guy is. After a lot of kind of trial and error with the base, just like mushing paint around, seeing where I would eventually be happy with it, I have a very good final product, which I'm so happy about. And here he is. Here's a good look at all of him in his majesty, his final painted form. I applied some blood effects paint to him, to his base, and I applied a little bit of vomit effects paint to his base as well. I don't always love how vibrant it is, so I do tend to go over it with a little bit of like a brown wash, just to mute the vibrancy of it a little bit, and I felt that that was a little bit necessary here. I wanted the brightest, most standout portion of this entire model to be him. I stuck with a bunch of sort of like duller, more muted tones, and it totally paid off. Now, while you guys are looking at this, I do just want to say thank you so much for watching. This video has been an interesting one. I think that I'm going to ultimately try and make some more short-form content, which is going to be less about the process that I go through to paint models and get them done. I feel like there's plenty of people far more skilled and eloquent than me who do how-to content regarding painting models and stuff like that. YouTube and the presentation that I'm ultimately deciding on is something that, you know, we're kind of growing into right now. If there's any particular, like, thoughts or ideas that you want me to explore, or you want me to touch on, you want me to talk about, do let me know. I'm absolutely open to feedback right now. Aside from that, I have 2 more of these Blight Templars to paint up, and then I have, 14 of the Pox Wretches to paint up as well, so there'll be a video coming out about that sometime. It's certainly going to be a lot less involved with me giving my thoughts on every little detail to do with it, because we've gone through it here, so we'll see how that goes, and I'll probably start painting those up now. So, with that, thank you guys once more so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Personally, I'm very impressed with the results that I got from this. He's super cool. I will be releasing something hopefully on time next week. Yay. That has been me for now. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all of that stuff, and kakitama. I will see you in the next video. Yeah, Nandor. Everyone say bye, Nandor. He's escaping.